and detectives have been searching for a blue tennis bag that went missing from the McCann's holiday apartment. The bag belonged to Jerry McCann. He'd been playing tennis in the hours before his daughter vanished.
It's a bag of a size that could be taken away from the flat, a child that would be of great interest to the investigating officer.
On the night of May 3, 2007, in the quiet resort town of Praia da Luz, Portugal, a family vacation turned into a nightmare that would haunt the world for years to come. 3-year-old Madeleine McCann vanished without a trace from the holiday apartment where she was sleeping. In an instant, her name became etched into history, not just as a missing child, but as the center of one of the most haunting mysteries of the 21st century. 17 years have passed, and yet the questions remain as sharp as ever. Thousands of pages of police files, countless interviews, and a storm of media coverage have done little to resolve the case. Among the many contradictions, 2 disturbing details continue to cast long shadows. A mysterious blue sports bag that appeared in the first police photographs but then vanished without explanation, and a DNA sample found in the trunk of a rental car hired by the McCanns 25 days after Madeleine disappeared. At first glance, the blue bag seemed ordinary, the kind of thing a tourist might pack with tennis rackets or holiday clothes. But it was large enough to carry something far more sinister, and the Renault Scenic, rented after the tragedy, carried within it not only the scent of human decomposition, detected by highly trained dogs, but also a partial DNA profile that matched Madeleine. Both items, ordinary on their own, became extraordinary under the weight of suspicion. Why did the bag disappear from official records? If it was nothing, why deny it even existed? If the car was innocent, why did the scent of death linger in its trunk? These are not wild conspiracy theories. They are forensic traces, unanswered questions, and contradictions that refuse to fade. The disappearance of Madeleine McCann is not just the story of a missing child. It is a lesson in how evidence can vanish, how timelines can fracture, and how silence can sometimes speak louder than words. And so we begin by following 2 silent witnesses, the missing blue tennis bag and the family's rented car, each holding secrets that may still whisper the truth. In the early hours after Madeleine vanished, Portuguese police photographed apartment 5A, capturing every corner in hopes of preserving crucial details. Among those images was something that would later haunt the investigation: a large blue sports bag tucked neatly inside a wardrobe. At first, it seemed unremarkable, the kind of hold-all any holidaying family might carry. But as the days unfolded, that ordinary bag became a ghost in the case. When investigators revisited the apartment, the bag was gone, vanished. No inventory listed it, no official file acknowledged it, and no one claimed it. Yet the photograph taken on May 3rd proved it had been there. Even more disturbing was what followed. Eddie, a cadaver dog specially trained to detect the scent of human decomposition, alerted strongly inside the very same wardrobe where the bag had been stored. His reactions suggested that something far darker than clothing or toys had once occupied that space. The McCanns, however, denied owning such a bag. Their spokesperson, Clarence Mitchell, was emphatic. The family did not return from holiday missing any bags. Jerry McCann himself dismissed the idea, insisting he never possessed a hold-all of that size. And yet, police records and photographic evidence clearly showed it. If it wasn't theirs, whose was it, and why had it disappeared so swiftly after being documented by authorities? Even their close friend David Payne, questioned by police, offered an oddly evasive answer. Yes, Jerry had sports bags, Payne admitted, but not one large enough to carry tennis rackets or anything more substantial. The statement downplayed the bag's importance, shrinking it into insignificance. But the image told a different story, a bag capacious enough not only for rackets, but possibly for a child's body. The disappearance of this single object became more than a footnote. It became a paradox, a bag undeniable in a photograph, disavowed by its supposed owners, and erased from official files. Its absence only deepened suspicion, especially when linked to Eddie's chilling alert inside that very wardrobe. If the bag was harmless, why deny it existed? If it was meaningless, why did it vanish? And if nothing sinister had ever touched it, then why did the scent of death linger in the place it once sat? The answers remain locked in silence, leaving the blue bag to hover over the case like a specter, a silent witness that refuses to fade. 25 days after Madeleine disappeared, the McCanns rented a silver Renault Scenic. On the surface, it was just a practical decision. They were still in Portugal, still searching for answers, and a car gave them freedom to move. But that car would soon become the focus of one of the most disturbing twists in the entire case. In September 2007, British forensic experts working with Portuguese police revealed that DNA had been found in the trunk of the Renault. Out of 19 genetic markers tested, 15 matched Madeleine's profile. Not a perfect match, but close enough to ignite a firestorm. At the same time, 2 British sniffer dogs, Eddie, trained to detect human decomposition, and Keela, trained to detect traces of human blood, alerted strongly in the Renault. Eddie signaled at the trunk and the driver's door. Keela identified traces in the boot. Both dogs had already reacted inside apartment 5A, including in the wardrobe where the blue bag once sat. The implications were devastating. If Madeleine's DNA was in the trunk of a car rented weeks after her disappearance, how could it have gotten there? The McCanns offered explanations: a spilled bag of seafood, a leaking package of supermarket meat, or even dirty nappies had left a strong odor. But investigators pointed out that cadaver dogs don't confuse fish or diapers with the unmistakable chemical compounds of human decomposition, and the DNA was far too close to Madeleine's to be dismissed as accidental transfer. Forensic scientist Goncalo Amaral, the lead Portuguese investigator, went further. He argued that the evidence suggested Madeleine's body had been preserved, possibly refrigerated, before being moved in the car. In Portugal's searing summer heat, a body would decompose rapidly, leaving strong odors and fluids within days. Yet the traces in the Renault were faint, degraded, consistent with a body preserved and then transported later. Amaral cited a prior Portuguese case in which a child's body was frozen to delay decomposition. His theory was chilling. The missing blue bag may have been used to move Madeleine's body first to a fridge, then later to the Renault Scenic. The McCanns and their relatives countered with conflicting stories. Jerry's brother-in-law insisted meat had leaked in the trunk. Kate's cousin said nappies were to blame. But neither explanation matched the precision of the dogs or the DNA results. No receipts were produced for the meat. No photos confirmed the nappies. What remained was a set of scientific findings that refused to be explained away. Could Madeleine's DNA really have been carried into the car secondhand, on toys or clothing? Perhaps. But cadaver scent cannot be explained by a cuddle cat or a blanket. It requires a decomposing body, and that was the detail no one could comfortably explain. The Renault Scenic was supposed to be a lifeline, a way to keep moving forward. Instead, it became a vehicle of suspicion, carrying with it a forensic shadow that still lingers nearly 2 decades later. Beyond the physical evidence, the behavior of those closest to Madeleine's disappearance added another unsettling layer to the mystery. Actions, words, and decisions that might have seemed ordinary in isolation began to form a troubling pattern when placed side by side. One of the most striking moments came just weeks after Madeleine vanished, when Kate and Jerry McCann dined with Sir Clement Freud, a well-known public figure later accused posthumously of inappropriate behavior with minors. Reports claim that during the dinner, jokes were made about cadaver dogs searching for sausages rather than evidence. For many observers, the levity was shocking, an almost flippant tone in the face of an unspeakable tragedy. It was not the reaction most would expect from grieving parents desperate for answers. The couple's response to the sniffer dogs also raised eyebrows. Eddie and Keela had reacted with unnerving precision, signaling decomposition and blood both inside apartment 5A and in the Renault Scenic. Instead of welcoming this evidence as possible clues, the McCanns dismissed the dog's reliability outright. Yet such canines had been used across Europe in homicide cases with great success. To brush aside their alerts so quickly struck many as defensive, not desperate. Other moments deepened the sense of unease. Reports suggested that Kate initially refused to participate in the physical search for Madeleine in the critical hours after she was discovered missing. Jerry claimed he searched, but none of the Tapas 7, friends dining with the McCanns that night, could corroborate his presence. For parents of a missing child, this absence of visible urgency seemed almost incomprehensible. Then there were the photographs. The McCanns handed over 74 images from their holiday to investigators, material that should have been invaluable in reconstructing a timeline. But shockingly, 71 of those photos had been altered, cropped or blacked out, rendering them largely useless. What was being hidden? A person, an object, perhaps even the blue bag? In criminal investigations, photographs are evidence, not souvenirs. Editing them on such a scale only fueled suspicion. Layer these details together: the awkward dinner, the dismissal of canine evidence, the absence of active searching, the heavily edited photos, and a troubling picture emerges. None of it is definitive proof of wrongdoing, but each piece chips away at the assumption of innocence. Instead of clarity, contradictions piled up. Instead of transparency, walls of denial were erected. And slowly, the case stopped looking like a straightforward tragedy and began to resemble something more guarded, more controlled, and infinitely more unsettling. If there is one thing that should anchor any criminal investigation, it is the timeline. Establish when the victim was last seen, track every movement, and fill every gap. Yet, in Madeleine McCann's case, the timeline itself became another source of doubt, a structure riddled with holes and contradictions. One of the most troubling gaps lies on the morning of May 3, 2007, the very day Madeleine was reported missing. According to the Ocean Club's child care records, she was scheduled to participate in a sailing activity, but no instructor recalled seeing her. The only person who claimed to have laid eyes on Madeleine that morning was a single nanny. No other staff, no guests, no independent witnesses confirmed her presence after breakfast. This absence of corroboration raised an unsettling question. Was Madeleine even alive throughout that day? Or had something happened earlier, with the evening abduction story constructed to preserve a different timeline? The evening timeline, as presented by the McCanns and their friends, hinged on a series of child checks between 8:30 and 10 p.m. during their dinner at the tapas bar. Jane Tanner, one of the tapas 7, gave one of the most famous accounts, claiming she saw a man carrying a child in his arms around 9:15 p.m. near the McCann's apartment. For years, this Tanner man became central to the abduction theory, but her identification shifted. Initially, she linked the figure to local man Robert Murat, who was later cleared. Then her certainty wavered, and another witness, Martin Smith, described a different man entirely at 10 p.m., also carrying a child. These contradictions weakened the reliability of the sighting that had been so heavily relied upon. Other inconsistencies added to the unease. Members of the tapas group gave statements that sometimes conflicted with each other. Details about who checked on which child and when varied. The supposed rhythm of the evening, meant to reassure investigators that Madeleine was safe until shortly before 10 p.m., became muddled under scrutiny. If the creche records were manipulated, if sightings were contradictory, if checks were inconsistent, then the narrative of a late-night abduction begins to unravel. A darker possibility emerges, that Madeleine may have died earlier, perhaps even before the evening meal, and that the story of regular checks and sudden discovery at 10 p.m. was crafted to support a timeline that no longer holds. In the world of investigations, time should bring clarity, but here, time became fog. And in that fog, certainty about Madeleine's last known moments dissolved, leaving investigators and the public to wonder. Was the truth hidden not in the night, but in the missing hours of the day? As the investigation deepened and suspicions grew, another battle was being waged, one not inside the police station, but in the court of public opinion. From the very beginning, Kate and Jerry McCann built a media machine around themselves, hiring lawyers, crisis managers, and even a full-time spokesperson. What started as a search for their daughter quickly evolved into a campaign to control the narrative. The official message was clear: Madeleine had been abducted. Any suggestion otherwise was not just wrong, it was dangerous, even malicious. Within weeks of being named formal suspects, the McCanns had secured prominent British legal and media consultants. Their response to scrutiny was not only defensive, but aggressive. Authors, journalists, and even online forums that dared to question the abduction theory were met with legal threats. The most high-profile target was Goncalo Amaral, the Portuguese lead investigator, who was removed from the case after publicly voicing doubts about the McCann's account. In 2008, he published The Truth of the Lie, outlining his theory that Madeleine had died in the apartment and her disappearance was covered up. The McCanns sued him, attempting to ban the book and claim damages. But Amaral was not the only one silenced. Independent publishers, bloggers, and online discussion groups also faced pressure. The case, once an open investigation, became a tightly managed story, where any deviation from the abduction narrative was framed as harmful conspiracy. Instead of welcoming every lead, the McCanns and their representatives worked to shut them down. At the same time, the family themselves refused to answer critical police questions. Kate McCann declined to respond to 48 inquiries, ranging from why there was no sign of forced entry to what exactly she did after discovering Madeleine missing. While their lawyers advised silence, the refusal to cooperate looked less like caution and more like control. Television interviews reinforced this posture. When asked about the cadaver dogs, the missing tennis bag, or the DNA in the Renault Scenic, the McCanns deflected or refused to engage. They repeated a single line: Madeleine was abducted, full stop. Any alternative possibility was dismissed as offensive or irrelevant. To some, this strategy made sense. The McCanns were grieving parents under global scrutiny, protecting themselves from hostile speculation. But to others, it felt like narrative management, an effort to shape what the world was allowed to believe. Legal battles, media campaigns, and a refusal to confront uncomfortable evidence painted a picture not just of sorrow, but of control. In the end, the question lingers. Were the McCanns simply victims twice over, first of tragedy, then of suspicion, or were they actively engineering a story too polished to let the truth break through? 17 years have passed, and yet the mystery of Madeleine McCann remains unresolved. The case is littered with fragments, pieces of evidence that never fit neatly together, contradictions that refuse to fade, and silences that echo louder than words. At the center of it all are three enduring shadows: a blue bag that appeared in a police photograph and then vanished without explanation, the alerts of two highly trained dogs to the unmistakable scent of death, and a partial DNA match found in the trunk of a car rented weeks after Madeleine disappeared. Individually, none of these details is conclusive. Together, they form a constellation of doubt that has haunted the investigation for nearly 2 decades. If the blue bag was harmless, why deny its existence? If the car was innocent, why did the scent of decomposition cling to its interior? If the timeline was accurate, why do records and testimonies collapse under scrutiny? Each question opens a door that no one has fully walked through. The McCanns, for their part, have always insisted on a single narrative: abduction. They have built a fortress of legal challenges, media campaigns, and public statements around that claim. And yet, for many who have followed the case closely, the fortress feels less like protection and more like a wall, one designed to keep certain questions from being asked too loudly. But the truth does not always come in the form of a confession. Sometimes it comes in what cannot be explained away. It comes in the missing pieces that no one will account for, in the silence when answers should be given, and in the contradictions that grow sharper with time. Madeleine's disappearance is more than a case file. It is a lesson in how evidence can vanish, how timelines can be shaped, and how stories can be controlled. And so we are left with the questions that refuse to die. What happened to the blue tennis bag? Whose DNA was in the trunk of the Renault Scenic? Why did the dogs alert in 2 locations tied so closely to the family? These are not accusations, they are echoes. Echoes of a child who should never have been lost, and of a truth that remains just beyond reach. Until those echoes are answered, the disappearance of Madeleine McCann will remain not only one of the most haunting mysteries of our time, but also one of the most enduring reminders that silence can sometimes hide more than words ever reveal.